The Boston Celtics stand on the edge of something that feels larger than a routine off-season adjustment. Less than 1 month before training camp, whispers suggest that Brad Stevens may not be finished with his chessboard. While other franchises close their doors and settle into preseason calm, Boston's front office continues to leave signs that a dramatic move could still shape the landscape of the 2526 season. The insiders at NBC Sports Boston went public with scenarios that go beyond the ordinary speculation about veteran shooters or end-of-the-bench fillers. They dared to ask whether Anfernee Simons, the guard whose arrival had already ignited speculation across the league, could be the centerpiece of a multi-team negotiation that not only reshapes Boston's payroll, but also recalibrates its long-term vision. Imagine this. The Celtics, already dancing with the luxury tax, weigh the possibility of sending Simons to Chicago in exchange for a package including Ayo Dosunmu, Jalen Smith, and Dallin Terry. At first glance, the numbers matter. Simons carries a contract worth $27 million. Moving him for players whose combined salaries create a $6 million reduction brings Boston closer to escaping punitive repeater tax penalties. Yet the intrigue goes far deeper than mathematics. Dosunmu represents the type of undervalued guard whose growth curve has outpaced his paycheck. He earns just $7.5 million, comparable to the Celtics' own Peyton Pritchard, but brings a defensive tenacity and a two-way skill set that coaches crave in playoff basketball. He has been on the floor for over 70 games in 3 of his first 4 seasons, a sign of availability that Boston desperately values after years of postseason injury frustrations. The concept is not merely about financial flexibility. It is about timing. If Boston secures Dosunmu now, they hold the right to extend him before next summer, when his market value could balloon into the $14 to $15 million range. That difference could be the very definition of a bargain, the kind of contract that creates championship depth while preserving resources for larger commitments to Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. A move like this echoes the philosophy that built the 2008 title team, when role players signed below-market deals to be part of a contender. Stevens may see in Dosunmu the same type of overlooked piece, one who thrives in the shadow of stars. The inclusion of Jalen Smith adds another layer. While Boston has experimented with big men who bring versatility, the truth is that the frontcourt remains the single greatest question mark. Smith, with experience and a reliable rebounding presence, offers insurance that is not currently present behind Kristaps Porzingis. His contract runs 2 more seasons, which allows Boston to assess his fit without the urgency of an immediate payday. Dallin Terry, meanwhile, might not hold immediate rotation weight, but in these negotiations every contract slot is a tool. His youth and athleticism give Boston either a developmental project or a trade chip that could be rerouted to a third team for further relief. But here lies the real curiosity. Why would Boston, after finally adding Simons, even consider moving him before he plays a single game? The answer is rooted in strategy. Simons is a proven scorer, but offers limited defensive upside. In a roster where Tatum and Brown consume the offensive spotlight, the question becomes whether Boston needs another high-usage creator or a guard who complements with defense, playmaking, and flexibility. Dosunmu, though less glamorous, checks those boxes. It is a choice between keeping a name that excites highlight reels or swapping him for a puzzle piece that balances the roster. The tension of that decision keeps fans and analysts guessing because both directions offer legitimate arguments for championship building. And then comes the more polarizing idea, one floated by insiders but quickly dissected. Nikola Vucevic, the veteran center from Chicago, could in theory be swapped for Simons in a 1-for-1 trade. On paper it fills the frontcourt void, but reality casts doubt. Vucevic is entering his mid-30s, carries defensive liabilities, and has just retired from international basketball, a sign that his body may not be prepared for the grind of a long NBA season. Moreover, his contract would not solve the tax situation, leaving Boston with an aging big man and without financial flexibility. The idea reminds fans that not all trades are progress, and sometimes restraint is the boldest move. Other voices inside NBC Sports Boston suggested a different kind of maneuver, one that plays more with emotion than numbers. The call to bring back Isaiah Thomas, whether as a player or as part of the staff, speaks to unfinished business between him and the franchise. For many, the image of Thomas playing through personal tragedy in 2017 remains iconic. While he may no longer fit as an active player, the symbolic impact of his return could resonate throughout the locker room. Teams chasing titles often rely not only on skill but also on culture, and restoring Thomas to the Celtic family could be a move that energizes the fan base and reaffirms the team's identity. Another hypothetical scenario placed Simons into a multi-team framework that included Toronto and Brooklyn. In that construction, Boston would receive Terrence Mann and Ochai Agbaji, while R.J. Barrett shifted to the Nets. This idea underscores how Stevens could use Simons not as a long-term keeper, but as currency to navigate complex three-way negotiations. Mann, though seen as slightly overpaid at $15 million annually, could still be flipped at the deadline for assets, while Agbaji offers youthful upside. It highlights how Boston might not simply trade Simons for fit, but for optionality. Flexibility itself becomes a weapon. Then there is the dream many fans whisper, but few believe possible, the notion of Al Horford returning once more. Though reports place him close to a deal with Golden State, the door remains slightly ajar until ink meets paper. His leadership, defensive IQ, and connection to Tatum and Brown make him a stabilizing presence that cannot be measured purely by statistics. If circumstances shifted and Boston reclaimed Horford, it would symbolize a reunion of trust and unfinished pursuit. Even at age 39, his role could extend beyond minutes, embedding wisdom into a locker room that still seeks balance between youth and experience. Yet not every insider recommended movement. Some argued to keep Simons and simply see how he looks in a winning system. After 5 years in struggling Portland environment, his true ceiling may not yet have been revealed. If he thrives alongside Tatum and Brown, Boston gains not only production but also trade leverage should they revisit the market mid-season. This perspective trusts Brad Stevens' patience, suggesting that sometimes the boldest gamble is to wait. Still, one cannot ignore the whispers of free agency. Malik Beasley, cleared of all wrongdoing after a summer clouded by investigation, remains unsigned. His most recent season featured one of the most efficient three-point campaigns in league history, converting over 41% on high volume. A shooter of that caliber, available in September, rarely crosses the market. The complication is cost. Beasley was once aligned to receive a contract worth over $40 million across 3 years. For Boston to pursue him, financial gymnastics would be required, possibly undermining the quest to avoid tax penalties. Yet the thought of adding one of the league's deadliest marksmen cannot be dismissed, especially when spacing the floor for Tatum and Brown remains paramount. So here is the mystery that grips Celtics fans. Is Stevens preparing to strike with a trade that redefines the backcourt, or is he quietly confident that the roster as currently built contains enough balance to contend? The truth may not emerge until the final days before training camp. The Celtics could roll into October with Simons still in uniform, only to surprise the league with a mid-season blockbuster. Or they could preempt the tax burden with an early swap, acquiring undervalued assets before rivals even realize their availability. Every scenario carries risk, but every scenario also carries hope. Whether it is the bargain of Dosunmu, the emotional return of Thomas, the improbable reunion with Horford, or the sniper's touch of Beasley, Boston's front office continues to remind the league that their ambition is relentless. Fans should not confuse silence with inaction. In this organization, still guided by the memory of 17 championships, each move is calculated with legacy in mind. And perhaps that is why speculation feels different this time. It is not simply about names or numbers, but about writing the next chapter of Celtics history. What remains certain is this. With training camp only weeks away, the Celtics have positioned themselves as the most unpredictable contender in basketball. And in a league where unpredictability often breeds opportunity, that may be the most powerful position of all. What if the most decisive moment of the Boston Celtics offseason is not the trades that already happened or the names we saw leaving the roster, but something that has yet to fully unfold, hidden behind the quiet movements of a brand new ownership group? September the 3rd marks not just the countdown to training camp, but the beginning of a new era where every choice carries weight far beyond the court. Fans look at the roster and wonder who will claim that final spot, but the real story may not be about the 12th man. It may be about how far the Celtics are willing to go under Bill Chisum and the capital he raised to secure this franchise for a price that exceeded $7 billion, a figure that by itself suggests he cannot afford to think small. When ownership changes hands, history shows us that patience is rare. Mark Cuban, Matt Ishbia, Steve Ballmer each made bold, sometimes reckless moves to stamp their identity on the team. Some succeeded in energizing fan bases, others plunged their franchises into years of uncertainty. The difference between being remembered as a visionary or as the reason for collapse can rest on a single gamble. The Clippers believe they could outsmart the system with secret deals and hidden endorsements, and now their entire draft future is in jeopardy. That scandal reveals a truth Celtics fans should quietly celebrate. For the first time in decades, Boston is entering a new age of ownership with an open field to shape its identity, while rivals in Los Angeles are facing the weight of punishment. Opportunity and danger rarely appear so close together. Chisum's group has already cut massive financial commitments, reducing the payroll from nearly $500 million in luxury taxes to around $220 million. At first glance, this looks like simple cost control. But think deeper. By trimming away unsustainable contracts now, they may be preparing for a strike at the moment when Jason Tatum is healthy again and ready to push the team back to the finals. History has always rewarded franchises that time their aggression at the exact right moment and punish those who panic too early. The Phoenix Suns spent everything for Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal only to watch their future dissolve. The Clippers built an arena and bought temporary stardom, but mortgaged the next decade. The Celtics, however, may be quietly placing themselves in position to dominate the second half of this decade, when other franchises will be paying for mistakes. Consider the symbolism of the new arena talks. The Garden has always been sacred, but the ownership structure ties the Celtics' revenue to another franchise. A new home could mean far more than updated seats and better concessions. It could become a declaration that Boston no longer shares the stage with anyone. Every major dynasty of the modern NBA has had an arena tied directly to its rise, from Chicago in the 90s to Golden State with the Chase Center. Imagine what it means for the Celtics to build space that is entirely their own, just as a core led by Tatum reaches its prime. And then there is the future market. The timing of restricted free agents like Josh Giddey, Quentin Grimes, and Cam Thomas being stuck in limbo today may look like bad fortune for them, but it opens a door for franchises with vision. If Boston keeps its books flexible until the right summer, a player who looks unreachable right now could become attainable. Giddey's late-season explosion of over 20 points, 11 rebounds, and 9 assists per game did not make headlines because it happened in Chicago. But if he sustains even a portion of that growth, he becomes the type of secondary playmaker who can unlock another gear in Boston's offense. And unlike many other markets, Boston still carries the allure of legacy. Some players dream not just of contracts, but of banners. That is where the curiosity lies. Not in the last roster spot, not in who takes the veteran minimum, but in the bigger stage being set. The Celtics could be preparing something massive that nobody will see coming until it happens, because true dynasties are not built in public negotiations, they are built in silence, while others are distracted. And the irony is that the Clippers scandal may have gifted Boston exactly what it needed, a warning of what not to do, and a clear lane to do things the right way. So as September slides toward training camp, fans should not only ask who fills the last spot, they should ask what ownership is planning behind the curtain. The Celtics are not just fighting for another playoff run, they are quietly positioning themselves for an era. And when the first piece of that puzzle finally drops, it may feel less like a roster adjustment and more like the opening move in a dynasty that could redefine the next decade of the NBA.